I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate. We think too much and feel too little. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness. Without these qualities, life will be violent. And all will be lost. All will be lost. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die. Dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Will return to the people. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. Now let us fight to free the world, to fulfill that promise. Let us all unite.
Welcome, folks, to the Corporation Nation radio show. I'm your host, Clint Richardson. I'm afraid it's just me again today. Like I said, I did a lot of thinking and a lot of contemplating on my little break, and I'll tell you what I didn't do is I didn't get on the computer a lot, and I, of course, didn't arrange for guests, so you're going to have to listen to me today. But today I thought I would take the time yet again to talk about and, well, if you will, preach. It's funny, I've realized I've turned into kind of a preacher. Not that I'm preaching gospel, because I'm not really an expert on the gospel. I intend to become more of an expert in the future, but I see that the tenets of law, the ecclesiastics, all of law is based on what the church created. I understand that the Bible is a legal text. I understand the words and what they mean. And so I find myself not preaching the Word of God, but trying to teach people how to understand that there is a Word of God, and it's called the natural law. But in order to get there, we have to understand this whole legal thing that's going on, this whole nasty replacement of what is otherwise a righteous language. So we must, of course, cut through the darkness and decay that was created by the attorney class, the law society. And we must understand that each word has a dualistic or pluralistic meaning. Unfortunately, this is, well, I just had a conversation today with some folks that I told them, look, hey, you're going to have to tell people, you want to start talking to people about Scripture. You want to start talking to people about what Scripture really is, that the maxims of law are all based around Scripture. You're going to have to explain them to them that you're dealing in a foreign language. Literally. The reason that folks, well, there's plenty of reasons, but the reasons people are so turned off by people who preach, especially the anthropomorphized version of the Christian doctrine, is because it is a foreign language. People aren't able to cope with it. People aren't able to accept it because it is a foreign language. Literally, you have to tell people that first thing. If you're gonna practice the art of preaching, the art of trying to teach people what the Bible is, what the Scripture is, and what the law is, you're going to have to explain that you're talking about one or more foreign languages that need to be understood. And just because those foreign languages sound exactly the same as the English language, the language that we use to express emotion and love and faith and harmony and all of the different emotional wonderful things about being human. That doesn't mean that the language that sounds exactly the same as that beautiful language means the same thing. The words are completely the words of this language, even though it mirrors the English language, are absolutely destructive because they have no love. Okay, government can't regulate love. Let's face it. That's what government can do. Government can only deal in artificial things, and thus the legal language can only deal in artificial things. You must have a status, something legal, to be put into this language. It's a horrible thing. Government can't regulate love. It can't regulate hate, even though it tries. It develops a legal status called hate or hate crimes, thanks to the ADL. But you see, government can only do positive things. That's what I want to talk to you about today. Is the difference between the negatives and the positives. You see, there is no good or bad. There is no right or wrong. There is no evil or good. There is just words. And what we do with those words and how we allow them to rule our life is exactly the issue that needs to be uncovered. And everything that we are going to be talking about today is either going to be a negative or a positive. Now, of course, the slimy, swarthy law society has changed even the meaning of these words. Okay, we can't think of them as conversational words because the word positive is not necessarily a positive thing, and the word negative is not necessarily a negative thing. When we're talking about these two words, we're talking about the way that law applies to persons or men. Okay, persons are not men, men are not persons. A person is a legal status granted or forced upon a man. Okay, now a positive law can only affect a person. A natural law can only affect a man. How does this work? All right, so forget it. Forget your English language, okay? Because we're talking about two words that have the opposite meaning as they do in language, in the conversational language: positive law and negative law. All right, let me give you some examples of the difference that we'll go over today, because this is it's one of the confusing things about understanding laws. Now, I guess the best way to explain it, the difference between a positive and a negative, is to imagine in your head a couple of magnets. Now, these magnets, when you try to put them together, if you flip them around, they'll go together really easy. But as soon as you get the negative polarity up against that positive polarity, and you try to force them together, well, guess what? You have a great, great barrier. It's an invisible barrier. You can't really see it, touch it, taste it, or feel it. But those two magnets don't want to go together because positive is the opposite of negative. Positive harms negative. It pushes the negative away. Positive and negative do not live well together. Okay. Now, how does this word positive apply to law? Well, guess what? Any law that is written by man, and that includes your Constitution, your Declaration of Independence, these are all positive. All your statutes, anything you find in the law books, anything that the courts have decided in their holy proceedings in their little church that they call the court. Everything is positive law. Okay. Well, what does that leave then? Well, negative law is everything that's not written by man. What we call God's law, natural law, the laws of nature. Most people will tell you that they get their rights from a piece of paper called the Constitution or some other document that was written by man. They've even been fooled into believing is a very powerful word, of course, that the Constitution was ordained by, and indeed it uses the word ordained in the Constitution, which should actually scare people more than anything. But people have actually been fooled into believing that the Constitution was indeed of God. That it was, even though it was written by men, that it was ordained by God. Well, let's take the Bill of Rights, for example. What the heck is a bill? Oh, well, we came to the music. But if you think about it, just for a moment, if you have rights, they're inherent. So what the heck is a Bill of Rights?
And the men who hold high places must be the ones who start to mold a new reality closer to the heart, closer to the heart. Blacksmith and the artist reflected in their art. They forge their creativity closer to the heart. Yes, closer to the heart.
All right, folks, welcome back. Until the mid-1900s, courts, the courts ruled, actually, in, I should say the mid-1800s. Courts ruled unanimously that the Bill of Rights only applied to federal government. Or I should say federal government incorporation alone, not to the states or to the people. In fact, under unanimous opinion written by our Chief Justice John Marshall, one of the great eugenicists of our time, he said the first 10 amendments contain no expression indicating an intention to apply them to the state governments. This court, referring to the Supreme Court, this court cannot so apply them. In other words, the first 10 amendments do not apply to the states in 1833. Wasn't that interesting? Or the people, by the way, because, of course, the people are in the states until the 14th Amendment came along and made them all members of the federal corporation in Washington, D.C. 14th Amendment citizens. Remember the word denizen that we went over to enfranchise all the slaves into the corporation. Denizen, citizen are pretty much the same thing, although denizen is a much more interesting word to look up. Now, if we have a bunch of rights, now, again, the word right is something that's very misunderstood, because a right is something that you have regardless of some piece of paper. It's kind of like God. If God exists, he exists despite what you believe. He exists despite what men write about him. He just exists. He might be a she or he might be an it. Whatever he is, he exists despite whatever the heck you believe, because your belief is not a requirement for his existence. It's not a prerequisite. It's not a post-requisite. Okay? I don't know. You don't know. Nobody knows. Perhaps someday we will know, and perhaps someday those who have darkened our humanity and deranged our law, our natural law, so we'll certainly discover that God exists, and hopefully we'll be cast out into, let's not go there. But if we have a bunch of rights and they are in the form of a bill, what does that mean? Well, a bill is a contract. It's a bill or obligation. Oh, wait a minute. A right is an obligation? How can a right be an obligation? That doesn't make sense. A bill is an obligation. In fact, they are the same thing, except that in English, we call it a bill. But in Latin, it's called obligatio, or obligation. It is a deed whereby the obligor acknowledges himself to owe unto the obligee a certain sum of money or some other thing in which, besides the names of the parties, are to be considered the sum of thing due. The time, the place, the manner of payment or delivery thereof. It may be indented or poll, and with or without a penalty. A bill is a legislation. So do you believe your rights come from some? Well, I mean, let's just put it this way: if today the Congress were to say, hey, we're going to create a new Bill of Rights, and those are going to be your new rights. We're not going to tell you what we're going to create. We're just going to put them onto paper, and they're going to replace the Bill of Rights. So it's going to be your new Bill of Rights. Would you say, well, sure, absolutely. Yeah, bring it on. I want a new set of rights. I don't care what they are. Just give them to me. I love the fact that you are acting as my overlord and are assigning those rights to me. Why would anyone in their right mind say yes to that? Well, why would we say yes to a bill of rights and then claim that those are our only rights? What kind of idiots are we? Our rights are inherent, remember? They were there before any bill ever said that they existed. If your rights... If you are claiming rights that exist only on a piece of paper, then chances are they probably do not exist in nature. And probably the chances are that your natural rights are being taken away. Your negative rights are being taken away by positive law. You see how that works? That magnetic attraction or disattraction? A bill is legislation, an instrument drawn or presented by a member or committee to a legislative body for its approbation and enactment. After it has gone through both houses and received the constitutional sanction of the chief magistrate, where such approbation is requisite, it becomes a law. Do you think God has a Congress? Do you think nature gathers a representative of every bug, animal, plankton, phytoplankton, amoeba? Do you think they all get together in a House of Representatives and say, "Okay, yeah, that's great, God. We accept your bill, your obligation. Thank you very much. May I have another?" Do you think that's the way that nature works? No, that is not how nature works. There is no consensus. There is no expense account. By the way, if you didn't know, according to the Senate Appropriations report, what they appropriate to themselves, that is, they have an average of about a $4 million tax-exempt expense account. You think they do this for the money or the benefits? No, they do it for their tax-exempt expense accounts. You can actually look that up for yourself. Just go to the appropriations, outlays, and something other report. Can't remember what the report's called, but I did a big article about it. How much does the Senate cost? Turns out it costs you quite a bit, and you'd be shocked at what these guys are spending. Maybe we'll cover that one day. Talk about wasteful spending. Do you know that the senators have a revolving haircut or hair care fund? Yeah, that's right. They can go to the barber and they can they have a little investment account set up that they can write off their haircuts. Yep. They have an expense account for their gym, and that's taking taxpayer dollars, putting it into an investment account, and of course investing that money. They have all kinds of things. It's amazing, really. But that $4 million on average dollar expense account per senator. Then, of course, you have Congress. Senators are only 100, where you have, 435 different representatives, non-delegates. So a bill is a contract. It's an obligation. Okay? Have you ever thought about what that means? Your right is actually it's an obligation. It's not a free, it's not an inherent thing. It's an obligation. It's a contractual obligation that you owe to government. Not that it owes to you. Because you remember, what does it say in those Bill of Rights? It basically lists the right and then tells you how it can take away that right. Remember that? We've covered that before. Your Fifth Amendment. What does the Fifth Amendment say? It says your life, your liberty, your property. Oh, we can't touch it without due process of law and just compensation. So if you have a Bill of Rights, you have an obligation. Government has an equal obligation or duty not to harm your life, liberty, or property, but it states very clearly that if the corrupt court system says that government can take your property, or if the corrupt court system says that you can be put to death or put in prison and made to work in a prison labor farm, well, then that's okay. Those are your rights. You see, those aren't inherent rights. Big difference between an inherent right, because no court, no government can take away an inherent right unless you agree to it. Through obligation, through contract, through accepting the Bill of Rights and the Constitution as if it was God-given. It is not. We'll be back.
What you're waiting for. We've already stripped you of your liberty, privacy, civil rights, and dignity. You want some more?
Did you see the Friday fighting ones. Did you hear the falling bombs? Did you ever wonder why we had to run for shelter when the promise of a brave new world unfurled beneath the clear blue sky?
Look, Mummy, the snow place.
Chaos theory, hurricane control, advanced cloud seeding, massive ionospheric heaters, storm-absorbing supergels, nanoscale weather machines. All of these technologies exist in some form today.
Look, Mummy, the snow plane up in the sky.
Goodbye, blue sky. Goodbye, blue sky. Goodbye. Goodbye.
All right, folks, welcome back. One of the funny things about the Bill of Rights, as we say, and, you know, I sometimes got to ask, has anybody out there actually read the Constitution? Has anybody out there read the damn Constitution? Where did you get the concept that we have a Bill of Rights? Who actually floated that? Okay, when I go to Bouvier's dictionary of 1856, remember this was commissioned by Congress. Bill of Rights is defined as English law, a statute passed in the reign of William and Mary, so called because it declared the true rights of British subjects. Folks, you know what a subject is? Because you're defined as a subject to the Constitution. In case you didn't know, you're subject to the laws of the United States. Now, of course, some people will say, well, I'm not. I'm a free man out here doing things. And yeah, well, that's what martial law is for, folks. Okay, that's you can't just say, "Oh no, I quit the system. I'm out of the system. It doesn't apply to me anymore." No, that doesn't work in a military occupation. That's why this is so important to understand. There's no getting out of this system, and that's part of the horrors of realizing this. Now you can maybe cushion the impact of it. You know, we talked about that today on the phone. I talked about starting a new community, a Christian community, if you will. For people who want to live under the natural law and not be governed. But is that even a possibility under a military occupation? It might be tolerated as long as you're not trying to compete or trying to, quote unquote, overthrow the government. Of course, government's main goal is its own, like any corporation, is its own standing, its own profiteering. Its continuity, if you will. The Bill of Rights, a statute passed in the reign of William and Mary, so called because it declared the true rights of British subjects. That's right in your Bouvier's Law Dictionary, folks. That is the official dictionary, or was, of Congress. Okay. Now, when we go into a look, again, this is why I say, has anybody actually read the quote unquote Bill of Rights? What does it actually? Go get the original copy of it and look at it. What does it say? Article the first, Article the second, Article the third. It doesn't say right. It doesn't say this is right number one. It doesn't say this is right number two. It says article. The Constitution is itself, in every rational sense and to every useful purpose, a Bill of Rights. Quote from Hamilton, Federalist Paper number 84, Bill of Rights are in their origin stipulations between kings and their subjects, abridgments of prerogative in favor of privilege. Privilege. Reservations of rights not surrendered to the prince. Such was the Magna Charta, obtained by the barons, sword in hand, from King John. Of course, anytime you do something under duress, as we all should know by now, after listening to myself, Bert, and others, anything that's done under duress doesn't really count. Isn't really lawful. So if you go to a king and you force him to sign a document under duress, guess what? It doesn't really count. That's Hamilton from Federalist number 84. He's telling you right there. Reservations of rights, abridgments of prerogative in favor of privilege. You have the privilege, you see, to have these quote-unquote rights or articles as they're presented in the amendment, the first 10th Amendment. You have they're not rights. I should say they're not natural rights. They're not inherent rights. Anyone who tells you they have constitutional rights knows not what they talk about. And how many people, even on this station, how many people still believe and tell you about constitutional rights? How many lawyers claim to be constitutional lawyers? What a bunch of crap. There's no such thing as a constitutional lawyer. Everything is... If you're a lawyer, you're constitutional. Okay, everything is constitutional, or it's not. You can't have one or the other. Oh, I'm a non-constitutional. So is there such thing as a non-constitutional lawyer? Huh? Let's take the negative. Is there a non-constitutional lawyer? Don't be fooled by these people who pretend to be patriotic and yet still tell you that your rights come from a piece of paper. It's a lie. It's the grand lie. It is the most heinous of lies for a people who do not know they are inherently free. Contracted slavery, contracted subjection to the law, or what is called the law. You know what else is funny about the Constitution? We have this thing where we think that Obama is not eligible to be president. For God's sake, who's not eligible to be president of a corporation? Who? Tell me. Well, let's read what the Constitution actually says. Oh, well, the Constitution says that only a natural-born citizen can be president. Did you read the Constitution? Here's what it says. And this is going to make a lot more sense here in a minute. Why this is such a ridiculous argument. No person, quoting from the Constitution, no person except a natural-born citizen or a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of this Constitution shall be eligible to the office of president. Well, what the heck is a citizen of the United States at the time of adoption of this Constitution? Do you have to be natural born to be a citizen of the United States? No. Did you then? Well, no, because the United States didn't exist. Did you ever think about this, folks? The Articles of Confederation were signed in 1977. It says a man must be 35 years old to be president of the United States. Yet the Articles of Confederation were signed in 1977. Constitution was signed in 1789, just 12 years later. 12 years. How can you possibly have a natural-born citizen then be president? It would be impossible. George Washington was an old man. He could not, in any way, shape, or form, be a natural-born citizen of the United States. In fact, Martin Van Buren was the first, and keep in mind, he was the 8th president, number 8 of the United States, elected in 1837. He was the first natural-born president of the United States. You had 7 presidents that were not natural-born citizens. What makes you think that Obama needs to be a natural-born citizen? Seriously, think about it. I mean, the oldest possible natural-born citizen in 1789 at the signing of the Constitution would have been what? A 12-year-old boy. The age of the first Constitution, which was called the Articles of Confederation, the first national one. That is, you had hundreds of constitutions. You had the Mayflower, you had the compacts, you had all those things. Doesn't matter. Just because we call it the Constitution does not mean that thousands didn't come before it. It's not that special. The only thing special about it is that we've been trained to treat it as if it's God, and it is not. Until you recognize that your rights are inherent, until you recognize that no man can tell you what your right is, you are going to be a slave. You're going to be a citizen, employee, whatever you want to call it, of the United States. Doesn't matter what status you pretend to have. Doesn't matter how much disconnected you've become. And we could talk till we're blue in the face about ways to get out of the system, to unplug from the matrix. But in truth, in a militarily occupied country? You can't. You know, you can try. You can live your life as if you are. But the second they want to mess with you, they're going to mess with you. That's the importance of the executive branch. That's why this country, and every country before it, throughout history, has been an executive country. It's been a country of force. Okay? That's why there's king. The king is the executive. What's the executive branch? It's the sheriff. It's the police. It's the president and his army. Ironically, army of us. It is us who does this to ourselves. It is our children that we send off to war, even though there hasn't been a declared war since they were born, or probably since we were born. The whole thing's so crazy. We'll be back, folks.
First of all, let me take just a moment to thank you for allowing me back into your homes. If this is your first time with us, let me extend a personal invitation. Let's build a happy little cloud. Let's build some happy little trees. There are no limits here. You start out by believing here. This is your world. You're the creator. Find freedom on this canvas. Believe that you can do it. Because you can do it.
The most important thing for the continuity of government is for you to continue to believe that your rights come from anything other than God, anything other than the natural law, anything other than your heart, your soul. That is the most important piece of propaganda that exists in any government. Remember, government, gubernator, to control. Mentis, Latin for mind control. The most important mind control technique that can happen in government is for you to continuously believe that your rights are not inherent, that they come from a piece of paper. This is not true. Read your Bible. This is not true. The tenets of law, the maxims of law are based on Scripture. You have a choice. You have the freedom of choice. You can follow God or you can follow man. You know what I've begun to realize is that the Bible isn't so much a warning. The end times, the revelations, the tribulations, da-da-da-da-da. No, it's the way things are going to be. And I think good Christians, whatever you want to call yourselves nowadays, I don't know. I'm so confused about the term. All I know is that Christianity is the religion. Anything else is not. Everything else is a doctrine outside of the true followings of the teachings of the man. But if you're going to be and truly live in those footsteps and claim your own rights, you're also going to have to accept the fact that you're going to be persecuted, just like in the Bible. You're going to be shuffled. You're going to have things thrown at you. You're going to be killed. You're going to be persecuted in every way possible. Question is that better than slavery? That's the question. Do you sell your soul or do you retain your soul? Do you use your soul as the source of your rights, or do you allow your soul to become a straw man? Exchange your soul for a piece of paper, a contract, a license to do things. That's the question. That's what Christianity is. Take the woo-woo religious crap out of it. That's what Christianity is. Following the natural law. Realization, self-actualization that you are. That God, as the Bible says, the temple of God is within you. It is not a building. It is not a place. It is not a thing. It is in you. Now, just to reiterify, Chief Justice Marshall, what he says the first 10 amendments contain no expression indicating an intention to apply them to the state governments. That means the people. The court cannot apply them. Okay? Constitution is a federal document. Has nothing to do with the states. In fact, something we've been trying to get across to people. It has nothing to do with you. If you claim the Constitution in court, it has nothing to do with you. The only reason you'd claim the Constitution is because you're trying to change, alter, or enforce something in the federal government. It has nothing to do with you. It does not give you rights. It lists in articles, not rights, the obligations that you have as a citizen. The Constitution. It's just, someone actually had the ridiculous notion that I hate the Constitution. How can I possibly hate a piece of paper? What I hate is the fact that people have been tricked into following it as if it is laid down by God. It is not. It is not. In fact, maybe later on we'll read the actual opinions of the Founding Fathers and what they thought of Christianity, how they despised it, how they were deists of the Masonic order. Maybe we should really hit that home so that people don't think that the Constitution in any way, shape, form, had anything to do with Christianity, nor the founding of this country. It's all an illusion. It is the propaganda that keeps the continuity of government afloat. I'm not trying to teach you to hate the Constitution. What a ridiculous concept. I'm trying to get you to wake up to your inherent nature as children of God, as children of nature, nothing else. That does not involve any piece of paper throughout history, nor one that will be coming soon that will take even more of your rights away. Doesn't include the United Nations, doesn't include the federal government, doesn't include anything. It's just a recognition of who and what you are. Until then, you have a status that is forced upon you. It is called rights, although it is privileges. With those rights, of course, your right to be put in pain, punished, put in prison, taxed, extorted, or exacted from. Those are your rights. Remember that. Statement of Equal Rights. Section, Title 42, I believe. Section 1981. Off the top of my head, that is what it says. You have the right. Under the Statement of Equal Rights, you have the right to be taxed, put in pain, have penalties assessed, punished, incarcerated, and extorted from. That's your right. You see the difference? That is not a natural right. That is a positive right. A positive right that completely repels your negative right. You see, the negative right is the right to not have something forced upon you. It's really simple. That's what a negative right is. Those are inherent rights. The right to not have anyone force anything upon you. How do you repel that? You create positive law. You create positive rights. These are not rights that are inherent. These are not rights that you can claim. These are rights that are forced upon you. A positive right is that which is forced upon you. Pain, penalty, taxes, incarceration, punishment, extortion, exaction, the taking of monies that are not due. That is your positive rights. That's what it means to be a member or citizen of government and accept those forms of rights. You see, even the word right has been twisted and turned. Some attorney came along and squeezed the fruit of natural law, and all that was left was the pulp, the crap that came out, and they called that positive law. Okay? Most important concept you'll ever know about law is the difference between negative and positive law. Everything in government, everything that government does, any law that is passed by any man is positive law. It is the right to have something forced upon you. It is your duty as a citizen and subject of the United States and its military occupation, for those of you who think you're free, to follow those duties, those rights. It is your duty. In this case, they've squished the word duty, which is a very sacred and holy word, and they've squished it and all the pulp that came out. And now, instead of duty, we have something called contractual obligation. It is the duty of citizens to be subjects. In other words, you're contractually obligated. Now, I'm not, again, do I hate? How can you hate something that has no emotion, has no love, has no hate? How can you hate a non-physical thing, a piece of paper that was written by some men? Can I hate the men who wrote it? I could, but they're so pathetic. How can I possibly hate them? I could forgive them. I could tell them, look, let's just start fresh, man. You just go on your way, do your own thing. We'll replace you. Let's go. No punishments needed. You fell. I don't know. Satan came along and completely distorted your point of view. You're tempted by the United Nations. You're tempted by your tax-exempt $4 million expense account. You're tempted by this. You're tempted by that. Let's just start over, man. Let's write a law that says men cannot be persons. No matter what you do, you're always responsible for your own actions. Do you know how many politicians would be exiting for the door if they were actually responsible for their own actions? Can you imagine? It would be like a Roach Motel. They'd all be scattering if they were actually responsible for their own actions instead of being in a corporation where their liability is limited, such as the United States. And it says that right in the Constitution, by the way, that when these guys are acting in the official capacity, they are immune from law. That's what sovereignty is, to be immune from law. All right, stay with us, folks. We'll be back.
Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes. Men who despise you, enslave you, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel. Treat you like cattle. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men, machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are men. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful. Let us use that power to make this life a wonderful adventure. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. A world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Let us all unite.
Back to the Corporation Nation radio program. I'm Clint Richardson today on a rant. Oh, I actually found this definition finally. I had it written. I guess I could have gone to the dictionary, but I had it written out in one of my previous articles. And it says, it says that sovereignty is the union and exercise of all human power possessed in a state. It is a combination of all power. It is the power to do everything in a state without accountability, to make laws, to execute and to apply them, to impose and collect taxes and levy contributions, to make war or peace, to form treaties of alliance or of commerce with foreign nations, and the like. Abstractedly, sovereignty resides in the body of a nation and belongs to the people. Yeah. But these powers are generally exercised by delegation, i.e. power of attorney. We talked about our representatives are really technically attorneys. We are attorning our power over to those folks to act on our behalf. They are the sovereign. We are not. We are subject to their words, basically. When analyzed, sovereignty is naturally divided into three great powers, namely the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. The first, the legislative, is the power to make new laws and to correct and repeal the old. Too bad the judicial came along and sort of took that power. The second is the power to violently execute the laws. Okay, I added the word violently. The second is the power to execute the laws both at home and abroad. And the last is the power to apply the laws to particular facts, to judge the disputes which arise among the citizens, and to punish crimes. Strictly speaking, in our Republican forms of government, the absolute sovereignty of the nation is in the people of the nation. And the residuary sovereignty of each state, not granted to any of its public functionaries, is in the people of the state. So when you read Chief Marshal, Justice Marshall, come out and say that the Constitution does not apply to the states, does not apply to the people, well, there you go. Constitution is a sovereign document, but that sovereignty has nothing to do with the people, has nothing to do with states. According to the court, you see, and that's what's important, is the court is the one that makes opinion. No matter what the law says so much is how the judicial interprets that law. And when you have three branches of government, well, actually two branches, since the judicial doesn't really exist, all departments of justice, everything in courts, all the attorney generals, the bar associations, all within the Department of Justice, not within the, which is an executive branch, not within the judicial, so-called judicial branch. Excuse me, I've been sick. So, you know, again, what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say, Pharaoh, let my people go. What was a pharaoh? Pharaoh is actually a house, the big or great house, the palace. The supreme ruler of ancient Egypt, the formal address for the sovereign seat of power as personified by the king in an institutional role of Horus, son of Osiris, often used for ancient Egyptian sovereignty. You see, sovereignty, it's not a new word. It's not a holy thing that came along with America. This was going on. The Pharaoh had sovereignty over his people. The Pharaoh had sovereignty to declare war. The Pharaoh had the kings. Okay, and again, what was the king was Horus, acting as or vicar of, just like the Pope. Just like, what's his name, way back in the 6,000 years ago, claimed that the Anunnaki were the ones that gave him his power. The Pharaoh claimed Osiris. The Pope claims Christ. Obama, let my people go. Queen Elizabeth, let my people go. Pope, let my people go. Take your house and stick it. Mormon prophet, let my people go. Israel, let my people go. I mean, seriously, and when I say my people, I mean my fellow man. I mean nothing else. I don't care what your color is. I don't care anything about that. No man can be free until all men are free. Well, I suppose I got off on a bit of a sidetrack there. So let's get back to the important stuff here. What we're talking about with rights. Can you imagine if, by the way, if people suddenly understood that the right to bear arms had nothing to do with the Constitution? Can you imagine if people suddenly realized that the right to bear arms has nothing to do with the Constitution? Wow. I mean, what an incredible, incredible wake-up call that would be. And God forbid that, again, a government that's only interested in its continuity and its corporate profit, as any corporation is, God forbid that the people should figure this out. The people should figure out that the purpose of the right to bear arms has nothing to do with and existed long before the Constitution. The arms were here long before the Constitution. The people were bearing the arms long before the Constitution. But imagine if people actually really figured that out. I mean, what an incredible reality that would be. Let's read United States versus Cruikshank, 1875. Supreme Court ruled that, quote, the right to bear arms is not granted by the Constitution. What? Let me read that again, folks. Supreme Court ruled in 1875 that the right to bear arms is not granted by the Constitution. Neither is it in any manner dependent upon that instrument for its existence. The Second Amendment means no more than that it shall not be infringed by Congress, and has no other effect than to restrict the powers of the national government. So when you walk around with your gun on your thigh and you claim that you have a Second Amendment right, you are actually incorrect. The Second Amendment, as the court says here, strictly and only affects the federal government, the national government. It does not affect you. That is a right that you will always have. And the only reason that you should be bearing arms is to protect your natural, inherent rights. You do not need a Second Amendment to carry a gun. Interestingly, though, you kind of do when you actually label your gun as a firearm, as we all foolishly do, when we register it with government and give it a straw man. We'll be back.
He's a rebel and a runner. He's a signal turning green. He's a restless young romantic, wants to run the big machine. He's got a problem with his poisons, but you know we'll find a cure. He's cleaning up the systems to keep his nature pure.
All right, folks, welcome back. Hey, did you pay attention to that last commercial? I don't want to fault the wording or the person who wrote that, but these are the kind of things we have to really pay attention to. We have to listen all the time. We have to be so aware of the words that are being thrown around. What did she say there at the end? She said something about protecting our rights. And something about limiting our freedoms, protecting our freedoms. Remember what freedom means? This is the important part about what I'm trying to get across here is that, remember, freedom means that you must obey the law. That is political freedom. That is a positive right. It's hard for people to accept that natural freedom means that you are, when you add that dom, D-O-M, under the words dominion, means you're under the dominion of God or nature. I don't care if you believe in God. So any idiots out there who want to bring up the term Bible thumper, by the way, get real. Okay, it's not a belief. We're not talking about some woo-woo crap that some Mormon is going to come and knock on your door about. We're talking about law and the basis of law. Okay, whatever else you want to believe, that's fine. Let's stick to the facts. Let's stick to the basics. Okay, when we're talking about freedom and we're talking about positive or negative freedom, negative being your inherent right to be free under God or under nature, which are basically the same thing. Nature's law is God's law, God of nature, law of nature, whatever you want to call it. Okay, it's just easier to say God. Because remember, our government is acting as God. It is acting as the intermediary. It is acting in between. It is assigning you rights, positive rights, that take away God's given natural rights, or nature, if that makes you feel better. All right? What I'm trying to tell you is that in that commercial, the typical American opinion is that our freedom comes from The Constitution comes from the law, comes from the government. Freedom is in its default state natural. If you're naturally free, then you're living under God's law. You're doing no harm. You're not accepting contracts that take away those rights. Okay, what she is talking about, to no fault, she is talking about the fact that we register our guns. You see, and what we do in the act of registration is that we assign a title. We take a real thing, something that you can touch, that you can load, that you can pet and stroke gently and say that you love it. And you can cock it and you can shoot it. All right, that's getting a little weird. Sorry. And we're putting that into a description box on a piece of paper and creating a legal status called firearm. See, government can't regulate your arms. They can't regulate your guns, anything else. But what it can do is it can request that you register your arm, create a legal fiction, because remember, government can't deal with you unless you are artificial and have a status that can have standing in court. Property, of course, has a standing as property. Slaves have a standing as slaves. Citizens have a standings of citizens. Your gun, your arms are recognized as something that cannot be regulated by government, which is why it wants you to say, oh, this isn't an arm. This is a firearm. Government can't regulate your marijuana. It can't regulate a plant. But if you admit that that plant is a quote-unquote drug, even though the very description of drug does not match a plant, now you can be arrested for possession of something that is artificial, a status of a plant. You see, you've just entered into the realm of contract law. You've just turned something wholly inherent into something negative, into something positive. And the magnet that is government is only attracted to positive things. Negative things repel government. Free men, Christians under God, repel government. You see? You're starting to understand the difference between a positive and a negative. Anytime you register anything, including yourself, including your children with their birth certificate, their marriage license, and all of that stuff, anytime you're registering anything, you're creating an artificial status, the only thing that government can possibly regulate. You're becoming the surety to that. You're becoming straw man. You're creating the straw man, which again, straw man, defined, stramanis homus, whatever it was in Latin, defined as surety or bail. Okay, that's your driver's license. That's your birth certificate. That's your social security. It's all of these statuses. What does the Bible say? Again, read the Bible because it is a presentation of the law, not for any other reason. Okay, you want to go be enlightened? Great. You want to have a religious experience? Great. But stop for a minute and go and read the Bible without that and understand what was being taught in those scriptures. Why are the maxims of law based on scripture? Why is the entire most respected dictionary in history, from what I understand, which is this 1828 Webster's Dictionary, why is it based in scripture? Because scripture is the basis of all law. You want to call me a Bible thumper? Well, you better start thumping that Bible yourself so that you can learn that you have a choice between God's law or natural law, the negative law, and the positive law. You have a contractual choice. You can sign that contract, you can agree to that contractual nature, or you can suspend. Now, this is, in its purest form, just information that I'm delivering to you. But the more people that we out there who understand this stuff can express to people who do not understand, who still believe some ridiculous thought that a piece of paper gives them a right. All a piece of paper does, in truth, in reality, is give people license. What does that mean? What does license mean? It means you're now allowed to do something that is illegal. It is permission to commit an illegal act. You ever thought about why it is that you need a marriage license? Because marriage isn't illegal. Oh, that's right. It's because you're getting married as a status in government. You're entering into a 3-party contract where the state owns you and your children. That's what marriage is in the legal realm. That doesn't mean you can't go to a church or to a waterfall or to a beach or to a volcano, for God's sake, and get married without permission. You don't need permission. What you need permission for, or license, is to create a legal status in government. You know, I'm against marriage, to be perfectly frank. Marriage in the form of a man and a woman, a natural man and a female natural man, going and getting a license to contract with the state that gives them absolutely nothing but the benefit of maybe giving 50% of their estate away through taxation. The purpose of marriage, the purpose of marriage in the state, in the government, is pure enslavement. There is no other purpose. It gives you privileges, not rights. It allows you to do certain things with the estate, but that's it. It has nothing to do with love. It has nothing to do with God. It has nothing to do with anything. It has nothing to do with nature. It has no emotion. It has no feeling. It's government.
Scientists have been battling to understand what this unappealing object is all about. What the object is all about.
Information in the form of energy streams in simultaneously through all of our sensory systems in the form of energy. And then it explodes into this enormous collage of what this present moment looks like, what it feels like, and what it sounds like. It explodes into this enormous collage. And in this moment, we are perfect. We are whole, and we are beautiful.
It appears rather gruesome, wrinkles like a walnut, and with the consistency of mushrooms, like a walnut.
It is the most mysterious part of the human body, and yet it dominates the way we live our adult lives. It is the brain.
The brain. Welcome back, folks, to the Corporation Nation. Oh, I was actually reading the Articles of Confederation, which is actually a fascinating document, and I got stuck on this on this one word that really bothered me, and it really lets you know what your true status is. It lets you know what it means to be in this kind of body politic. And it's actually Article 12 of the Articles of Confederation. It says all bills of credit emitted, monies borrowed, and debts contracted by or under the authority of Congress before the assembling of the United States in pursuance of the present Confederation shall be deemed and considered as a charge against the United States. In this case, of course, the United States didn't quite exist in the term that we're talking about, because we're talking about the Articles of Confederation. Shall be deemed against the States United, would probably be a better word, for payment and satisfaction whereof the said United States, or States United, and the public faith are hereby solemnly pledged. And I looked at that, I'm going, wow. The public faith is hereby solemnly pledged? Wait a minute, what does that mean? How can you pledge the faith of the public? What does that mean? What is a pledge? Well, pledge is he who becomes security for another. And in this sense, everyone who becomes bail for another is a pledge. It's a contract, a bailment of goods by a debtor to his creditor. Well, wait a minute. So that means the United States was a debtor, and it was pledging something to its creditor, which in this case, of course, was the king. Okay. What's going on here? To be kept till the debt is discharged, which means that the people's faith were kept by the king until that debt was discharged. Was the debt ever discharged? You tell me. A contract by which a debtor gives to his creditor a thing to detain as security for his debt. So the debt of these people who created the United States, these Masons, basically, who came over here and created the United States, the debt was secured by the let's see, the term pledge or pawn is confined to personal property, where real or personal property is transferred by a conveyance of the title as a security. It is commonly denominated a mortgage. So basically what it's saying is that there's a mortgage on all of the people as a pledge of good faith. Also says it's also called a chattel mortgage. Oh, well, there you go. That's what Black's Fourth adds to the equation. In a chattel mortgage, a bailment of personal property as security for a debt or other obligation. A bailment of your personal property. So in other words, all the people of America were pledged, and their personal property were pledged as the good faith of the United States. In other words, it can be taken if the United States defaults on its debt. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The specific article delivered to the creditor in security is also called a pledge or a pawn. Now, where have we heard the term article before? Oh, well, let's see. We just heard it in the Bill of Rights, which really isn't rights. Remember, those are articles that designate a certain amount of privilege, but certainly not rights. So a specific article delivered in security is also called a pledge or a pawn. That's very interesting. Where else do we find articles? Oh, yes. How about Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, Article 4, Article 5, 6, and 7 of the Constitution? Those are articles, aren't they? Doesn't the Constitution itself actually say very clearly that the debts that were concurred, I don't know the word there, the debts that were already exist are not canceled by this Constitution? In other words, this Constitution is a debt compact? Well, yeah, that's exactly what the Constitution says. When you look up the definition of Constitution, what does it say? It's a debt compact or a debt contract. A constitutor is someone who owes the debt. This is right out of the legal dictionaries, folks. The legal dictionaries that were requested and paid for by Congress. Bouvier's Law Dictionary. Incredible realization. To constitute, contract, to empower, to authorize in a common form of letters of attorney. In other words, to hand over your power through the attornment process. I nominate, constitute, and appoint. That's what to constitute means. So when you nominate and elect a representative, you are constituting or attorning your power to that person. They are attorneys in the weird sense that they are. Constitution, listed as a contract. The constitution of a contract is the making of the contract as the written constitution of a debt. Now, how can you be declaring freedom while also to be declaring debt? How do you justify the two? No, anybody out there that has a mortgage knows that you are not free. You're not free and clear. You have a debt. Anyone that has any kind of debt understands that that is no form of freedom. So how can you call the Constitution, which is described and defined by the very dictionary that was accepted into Congress, paid for by Congress? The constitution of a contract is the making of the contract as the written constitution of a debt. What is a constitutor under civil law? He who promised by simple pact to pay the debt of another. And this is always a principal obligation. Well, hey, what did we just read? What did we just read, folks? That we were pledged to, or as, the good faith of the nation. What is the word faith? We can't forget to define the word faith. We've done it before, but we'll do it again. Confidence, credit, reliance. Remember, this is a chattel mortgage. That's basically what the Constitution was. The Articles of Confederation were pledging the states and the people within and their personal property as collateral. Credit, reliance, an act may be said to be done on the faith of certain representations, belief, credence, and trust. Not the kind of trust that you have for your father or your mother. This is the legal kind, a financial trust, a financial instrument. Thus, the Constitution provides that full faith and credit shall be given to the judgments of each state in the courts of the others. A state of knowledge or design. Listen to this. In Scotch law, a solemn pledge or oath. To make faith is to swear with the right hand uplifted that one will declare the truth. Very interesting. Oh, so, again, what is a constitution? Don't go and try to define the Constitution or the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, by reading the Constitution. What is a constitution? That's the important question. And when we go to Bouvier's Law Dictionary, or any dictionary for that matter, we're going to find that it is a debt compact. It is a statement of debt offering the faith and credit of the chattel, that's us, and our personal property. This is why I say the Constitution is not in any way, shape, or form of God. You ever read the actual quotes of the founding fathers? You'd be amazed at what they say about Christianity and how they despised it and how they didn't want it to have anything to do with this United States of ours. Only civil law, no, nothing else. We'll be back, folks. Stay with us.
Versus this ride. The world is like a ride. You think it's real, it's just a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. The world is like a ride. You think it's real, it's just a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. Life goes up and down, round and round.
There are certain figures in history that we've all been trained to respect, and for the most part, a lot of their words have great meaning and great explain a lot. Some of the words, though, that are not put forth are let's take Thomas Paine, for example. Thomas Paine was an awesome writer. I gotta admit, I mean, what a wonderful poet he was when it came to the language, but there are also some truths about these people that we have to understand. Now, I spent months and months and months and months and months recording everything I could find about the Masonic nature of our founding fathers. And it's very important to understand that the deity is not the same as the God of the Bible. Here is Thomas Paine and what he says as a Mason, as a Freemason. He says, "It is the duty of every true deist to vindicate the moral justice of God against the evils of the Bible." I'll say that again. It is the duty of every true deist to vindicate the moral justice of God against the evils of the Bible. Now, these people, first of all, don't get me wrong, because they understood the importance of religion. Now, when they came to America, they created, they pretty much got rid of the ecclesiastical aspect of law by the separation of church and state. And what they did was they took the civil aspect of law and made it the government. They excluded God from the Constitution. God is not mentioned in the Constitution. God was not mentioned in the Pledge of Allegiance. God was not mentioned anywhere. Okay? And that's significant in more ways than one because, again, we're talking about the natural law when we're talking about God. Benjamin Franklin said, again, this is the importance of religion as spoken by Benjamin Franklin, who himself was apparently a really bad man, a Freemason and deist. Through himself, this is reading from Edwin S. Gestad, Faith of Our Fathers, Religion in the New Nation, 1987. Through himself, though himself surely a free thinker, Franklin cautioned other free thinkers to be careful about dismissing institutional religion too lightly or too quickly. Quote, "Think how great a proportion of mankind," he warned in 1757, "consists of weak and ignorant men and women, and of inexperienced youth of both sexes, who have need of the motives of religion to restrain them from vice, to support their virtue, and retain them in the practice of it till it becomes habitual." Which is the great point for its security. So why were they protecting religion, folks? Do you think that these Masonic deist founding fathers were protecting the freedom, quote unquote, freedom? Remember what that word means, freedom of religion. Do you think they were protecting it because they loved it, because they thought that every man should be free to think and be a free thinker? No. It says right there in his quote by Benjamin Franklin, okay, to retain them in the practice of religion till it becomes habitual. What is that, brainwashing? Oh, okay, that's pretty habitual, which is the great point for the security of institutional, or in other words, corporate religion. This is why they were protecting the freedom of religion. It was not because it is your right to be whatever religion you want. It is because it was very important to have all of the ignorant men and women, the weak of mind, which of course is everybody but the bloodline, right? Everybody but the Masonic order, everybody but those who are in charge of us, are the chattel masters, basically. The ones who pledged us, the ignorant men and women, as a chattel mortgage, right? Okay, that's why they were protecting religion. That's why these things were protected. It's not your rights that are protected, is the point I'm trying to make here. The point for protecting the concept of religion and its freedom meaning to obey the law, so, take that for what it means. You got to understand that this cartoonish, story that we have about the founding of the United States is so far off in left field. It's amazing. I again refer people to my part 1 and part 2 of Cracking the Cult of the Constitution if you want to see some of this information for yourself. Also, tyranny requires equality is one of the points I was trying to make today, but didn't really get around to having time. So I guess we'll continue this conversation a little bit tomorrow and take some calls tomorrow. Apologize for anybody who was on the line today. I was in the middle of a rant, and of course, when that happens, the whole world goes dark. I guess the point, when we're talking again, the most important aspect of law is the positive and the negative. And we always must be drawn to the negative. Even though it sounds bad, the negative does not mean bad. It just means the opposite of something that is positive. Positive is not always good. Okay, let's give you some examples. In negative law, you have man. In positive law, you have person. One is real, one is artificial. You have free if you're in negative law, and you have the word freedom if you're in positive law. One is natural state of being free and being responsible for your own actions. One is positive, meaning it is a privilege granted to you to be free to do whatever you want as long as you obey the laws of man, no matter how tyrannical. A free man versus a citizen. Natural versus political. Liberty, in the sense that it is a negative liberty or a natural liberty. There's also positive liberty, unfortunately. That means that is the kind of liberty that's discussed in the Constitution. That means basically the same thing as freedom, where if you actually go read the definition of liberty, you'll be shocked, because it's broken up into specific things. And positive liberty, which is the one that's granted by government, is not the one you should be wanting. Liberty versus entitlement. You're entitled to certain rights, whereas under natural liberty or God-given liberty, your rights were given. They are inherent. With an entitlement can be changed or taken away. Negative is God-given. Positive is man-made or government-granted. You can have negative rights. You can have positive rights. A right is natural. A privilege is positive. A right, again, is natural. And a duty is positive. But see, now we take that back and we say a duty is negative, because a duty is a moral responsibility, whereas a contractual obligation replaces a duty and becomes a positive thing, something that can be forced upon you, in other words. Remember, the person or personhood, freedom, citizenship, political things, entitlements, anything man-made or government-granted, and privileges and contractual obligations are all things that can be forced upon you. What government can't force you to be a man, and let's face it, most of us aren't acting as men. We're pussified. Remember that word, pussification, or whatever it was that we read? Pussimilliminus or something like that. A government can't force you to be free, but it can force you to have freedom. A government can't force you to be a free man, but it can force you to be a citizen through coercion and so many other aspects. It can't force you to have liberty. It can force you to accept political liberty or entitlement. It can't force you to recognize God. It can force you to recognize it, which it does through the labor code. All right, folks. Thank you so much for joining me today through my emotional roller coaster of a rant today. We'll continue this tomorrow and take some calls. Till then, I bid you adieu.